Hey everyone, today I'm taking a look at New York Zoo, which is a 1 to 5 player tile placement board game designed by Uwe Rosenberg and published by Capstone Games. This one takes around 30 to 60 minutes to play, depending on that player count. Now, as you'd probably expect from a Mr. Rosenberg game, this one is a polyomino style game that looks like this when it's on the table, where you have this big communal long board here, where all these different tiles have been semi-randomly laid out on these different notches in the board here, where you have these smaller tiles kind of covered up by the larger tiles, at least the ones with the biggest surface area. You've also got this elephant marker here, which is going to be the almost like the player piece where people are moving around to determine which actions you're going to take. And also each player is going to have their own individual zoo, which is going to start off as basically a bare bit of land with a couple of houses here, which lets you kind of manage your kind of intake and outtake of animals, and also you've got your lower kind of actions breakdown here. Additionally, you have all the different animal meeples, which will come into play a bit later. You've got 5 different types here, ranging from these penguins to these flamingos, meerkats, these Arctic foxes, and these kangaroos. And also you've got these attraction tiles, which is another way you're going to end up trying to fill up your board, because the objective of this game is to be the first player to completely fill up every single square on your personal zoo. So the way you're going to fill up your zoo is of course by placing these tiles, and when you do that, depending on the player count, you're going to move a number of spots around this rondelle. So you can see here, I've basically mocked up a 3-player game here, but I'll only be using 1 player board. And in a 3-player game, you move 1 to 3 spaces around that rondelle. So I could go, let's say, 1, 2, 3, or I could just stop here if I wanted to. Now, these spots here, these darker spots, do not count towards your movement spots. And also, if any bays become empty, then that will also not count towards your movement. So you're only going to be counting these full bays here, or the blue ones. Now, let's just say I stopped here with these tiles. Now I'm going to take the topmost tile and I'm going to place it somewhere on my board. So let's just do this without really thinking about it, like so. And once I do that, I can choose to either move 1 or 2 types of the same animal into this enclosure. So let's just say I put this meerkat in it like this, taking up 1 individual square. But if I had another enclosure on the board with a meerkat on it, or at least more than 1 meerkat on it, I could move that one into there as well to try and fill up that tile faster. Now, if I ever land on one of these blue spots, I'm going to take a number of animals, either 1 or 2 of the matching type, and put them onto my player board. So you can see here we've got the Arctic fox and the flamingo. We're going to take the Arctic fox and flamingo, so let's just say you've got the flamingo here. I can either put them into this house here, this kind of storage area on the side, or I could put it on an existing tile where flamingos already are. So I could go like this, for example. Or I could put it on an empty closure if there is one. So I could say, put this Arctic fox here, like this. Now, why are we trying to fill up these spaces? The reason why we're trying to fill up these spaces completely with animals is because once it's completely complete, we're going to remove those animals and potentially, well, if we want to, put 1 on an empty house if we have that option, and then you're going to claim 1 of these attraction tiles, which will help you fill up your board a lot quicker. So let's just say I managed to fill up this box, this 5 tile here with Arctic foxes. Then I could take maybe this big one here and fill up a big chunk of my map, like so. Now, you may have also noticed these dark spaces here. Now, whenever the elephant piece moves past one of those ones, bearing in mind that it's not one of your movement points to do so, then all the players are going to have a look at that animal type and refer to their player board and see if you have at least 2 of that animal type in an enclosure. So you can see here the flamingos we've just passed. We'll have a look at our flamingo enclosure. There's 2 flamingos in there, so therefore they're going to breed and create another flamingo. And you can do that twice, as long as you have 2 enclosures with at least 2 of that animal type in it, or maybe more depending on the player count. But that's generally how that mechanism works. And that is essentially how the game works. You're going to keep either breeding animals or placing tiles until somebody has completely filled up every single square, and that player is going to be declared the winner. Okay, so let's go into some thoughts on New York Zoo. So, as you might know, Uwe Rosenberg is very much known for these polyomino style games, and all of these games seem to have a very slight little twist on the last, and they're not massively different. Of course, the twist on this game being that animal breeding mechanism. When you place these animals and you have at least 2, then they're going to duplicate and fill up these tiles. And I think that's quite a cool mechanism, but particularly because you have that conundrum of wanting to get the big tiles down because they're going to fill up a lot more ground and cover up your board quicker, but the smaller tiles are good, or they go hand in hand better with the animals because they're going to fill up a lot quicker, because of course the Bigger tiles have a lot more spaces and therefore they're slower to build up. Additionally, you want to be making sure that you always have that efficiency going where you've got at least a pair of animals on a tile, because when you're crossing these regions you will be making sure that you're always duplicating and not missing out on that. And weighing that up and knowing how to be efficient with that is quite an important decision, because if all the other people are breeding and you're not, then you're going to be slowly falling behind. Because of course this is essentially a race game. And I like the fact that, you do need to weigh up that decision of, am I going to try and get these big tiles down and fill up that big surface area? Or am I going to maybe pick up some smaller tiles with the aim of filling that with animals quicker to claim these attraction tiles? Because these attraction tiles are really good, and particularly when you get them early, because the early ones you're going to end up getting these massive ones, you can fill up a lot of space. But also these smaller ones are useful later in the game because they help you fill up these little nooks and crannies that you might not be able to fill otherwise. There's also an additional decision of how to manage your little house buildings here, because whenever you complete a building or complete a tile full of animals, you can actually place a remaining animal on there if there is that space available, which can be important because when you place a future tile, you want to be able to move things in there straight away. And if you have duplicates, then you can move them both in there and then start breeding again. So that little bit of efficiency does come through on how to manage these animals, but it's not terribly complex. And I like the way that this game has such a clear end game objective. You don't have to fuss around with points, or there's no fiddly convoluted rules. It's just who can get those spaces filled up the quickest, and everybody is going to understand that objective. Now, I will say I feel the game goes on a little bit too long, not terribly long, but because I think you come out of the gate so strong with this game by picking up all the massive tiles on top, and then the tiles below start getting smaller and smaller. It has that weird pacing where you feel off that you're starting strong, but then it kind of starts bringing itself to a halt and starts slowing down. Now, I understand the board is going to get tighter and tighter, and therefore you're going to need those smaller enclosures to fill those gaps, but it just does feel a little bit weird. Uptime of the game is pretty decent. The decisions aren't massive here. You only got like 1 to 3 spaces, or maybe 1 to 4 spaces to move around this rondelle, so your options are limited. And I do like the fact that when people do go past these spots, at least you have some engagement there of wanting to breed your animals and place more animals on your personal board. So you do have that level of investment on what the other players do. Now, the player interaction really does come through by the race of the game, because you want to be kind of looking over your shoulder to see how well people are doing and trying to beat them to the punch. But additionally, you're going to be competing over the same tiles, because you might want people to only move 1 space because you're next, because you want the tile that's 3 spaces away. So there is that kind of passive interaction that way. Additionally, there is that competition of filling up your tiles, because you want to get the particular attraction tiles down as quickly as you can, because they are limited, especially these bigger ones. There's only 1 of each of these. So you want to be making sure you're getting those first. So that's really where the competition lies. The production of the game is a mixed bag, really. It looks lovely at a glance. I would say that the setup and things is a little bit annoying, because you've got to place all these tiles on top of each other, and they're not the easiest to differentiate from each other. Yes, you can go on the size, but it just becomes a bit of a chore, really, to set everything up, because they're all so kind of similar in the way they look. Additionally, the meeples themselves look fantastic. They're really intricately designed, and they're wonderful, really. But the problem is that they are very small and quite fiddly, and when you start placing them on your board here, you could just knock things over and things. It's very fiddly, especially when you start getting in gaps like this. And if you have big hands like I do, it becomes even more problematic. But other than that, I do like the look of the game. These boards are fine. They're just like basically cardboard. But everything else is perfectly up to scratch. The attraction tiles look good, and the tiles themselves are not too big, but they're still quite durable, and it doesn't take up too much space apart from the actual main board itself. But yeah, I'm generally happy with the production, just a little bit fiddly when it comes to completely cramming in all these meeples on your player board. Okay, so final thoughts on New York Zoo. This is a game that is what it is, really. I'm not terribly excited by it, if I'm honest. It's just another polyomino game with a little twist on it in terms of breeding these animals. And I do like that in theory. I think it's quite a cool idea, and how to use them and how to manage that most efficiently to make sure that you're triggering every single time is quite a cool decision, and it's something you need to manage accordingly. But I don't think it's enough to make it feel different enough and to make it stand out amongst the pack of so many great tile placement games. Now, I am saying that through the eyes and kind of perspective of a more kind of seasoned gamer. I've played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games, but I played this with with relatively inexperienced gamers who've not played many games at all, and they had an absolute blast with it. So I am kind of being objective that way and thinking, it definitely has an audience who are going to enjoy this one. But for me, it just didn't feel like it had enough going on for it to make it appealing to me personally. Especially, it became a bit of a chore to set up. It becomes a bit of a chore to actually move things around and things. Again, it's just so fiddly, you knock things over all the time and they go everywhere. So that for me was a bit annoying. But other than that, it's a fine game. I do think there's other Rosenberg games that are better in this genre. I think Patchwork is still head and shoulders above the rest. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, there we go. It's a game that's going to be good for families. It's got a nice visual look to it. Lovely production. If you can have small enough fingers to move things around. But other than that, it's just not terribly inspiring to me personally. But I can't really fault it objectively. I like the clear objective of trying to be the first one to fill up your board. But other than that, it's just a bit of a meh for me. That is New York Zoo by Uwe Rosenberg.